All right, good afternoon and welcome to the MACC policy meeting July 25th at Laketown Township Hall. First item on our agenda is the review and approval of minutes from our prior meeting of June 6th. If there's any changes or comments, we'll take them now. None? Okay. Then just need a motion to approve. Second?
Support.
Howard. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Was it opposed? Oh, you're just waving at him. I'm just kidding. I apologize, I forgot to do the introductions real quick. I'm Punkage with the MACC.
Howard Bauman with Port Sheldon Township.
Terry Hoffmeyer, Laketown Township.
Tom Bird, Ottawa Road Commission.
David Van Gedover, community member at large.
Terry Nienhuis, Holland Township.
Al Laird, Zealand Township.
Skip Keeter, Park Township.
Nancy DeBoer, City of Holland.
Ken DeWeer, Fillmore Township.
John Klein-Exel, Allegan County Road Commission.
Russ Tassano, the MACC Authority Board.
Kevin Kleinstra, City of Zealand.
John Lanham, Michigan Department of Transportation.
Steve Redmond, MDOT. Gordon Coates, the MACC.
Steve Boltice, Director of the MACC.
And
David Fairchild, MDOT.
Aaron Spicer with the MACC.
Carol Olson with the MACC. Elizabeth Water, MACC. Kelly Gower with the MACC.
okay.
Can I just mention, I brought David Fairchild along with me. I just
Okay.
wanted to introduce him to the policy committee and just to say he's been a recent employee with us 6 months now, but he's done a very good job in working with the MACC staff and doing a lot of the administrative work, doing the payment invoices that the MACC sends in, and all the TIP amendments that you guys request from time to time, and making sure that those are taken care of and expedited along their way. So just wanted him to come along and see you all in action.
Welcome and thanks for making the trip.
And I should certainly add that David was instrumental in helping us turn around that bid savings on the Port Sheldon job and get it into the Zealand Fairview Pathway project, and also the money for the traffic circulation study we're going to do. So thank you very much. He turned that around really quickly for us.
All right, any comments from the public? I don't think we have anyone from the general public here today. So next item, I think, Steve, we have a review of the MACC agreement.
That's right. So you may recall that we had made some fairly narrow changes to the bylaws. Hopefully those are going through your review and approval process right now. I'm aware of action being taken by Fillmore Township and Park Township, and I believe, Howard, did you take it through your? Okay, so those are the three I have heard from thus far. Zealand Township took care of it as well. Good. So hopefully the rest of you are moving that, those being the cities and townships, are moving that through your process. But at that time, we had said that we would take a closer look at the bylaws, a little more in-depth look, and see if they still reflect kind of where we are as an organization. I mean, they were put together 23 years ago, and we certainly have evolved as an organization since then. At that time, I had noted that it would also be, I think, beneficial to take a little bit of time to review the other, what I consider, foundational document as it results to the governance and operation of the MACC, and that is an agreement. For some of you, it would not surprise me at all if this is the first time you're looking at this and becoming aware that your unit of government has such an agreement. For others of you, it'll be more of a reacquainting yourself with it. But what I was hoping to do is just kind of go through it here. I have about a dozen slides or so that I hope provide kind of an overview of the document, so we all have a baseline of information and knowledge regarding this other foundational document. So then as we continue with our conversations with the bylaws, that we're thinking about the agreement in tandem. So if you had a chance to take a look at it, you'll see in the opening recital it speaks specifically to the formation of the MACC in response to federal legislation. The City of Holland, the City of Zeeland Park Township, and Holland Township leaders, typically the chief elected official as well as professional manager if they had one back in 1989, had been meeting informally since that time, since '89. But when MDOT came calling in '93 as a result of the last census that occurred in 1990, decennial census, where the Holland urbanized area had exceeded the population threshold of 50,000, and the urbanized area needed to designate a metropolitan planning organization. So when you take a look at that opening recital, that is really the issue that is first addressed in the document, because that was the presenting issue, certainly. And of course, the designation of MPO is necessary to make the area eligible for the federal surface transportation funds and the other transportation funding that was available to it. So you see kind of a heavy emphasis on that in the first page or so, and really that's the reason why. It also identifies early on that the enabling legislation that the MACC is formed under is the Intermunicipality Study Committee, or Public Act 200 of 1957. I didn't provide that for you today, but it's a very simple act. It's about a page and a half, and essentially it allows entities such as yourself to come together to study issues. And really that's about all that the Enabling Act provides in terms of powers and so forth. That is the one that was chosen. That was a recommendation from the Michigan Department of Transportation. Several small MPOs, Battle Creek, I know, Midland, a new MPO has formed under that. So there are several MPOs that are formed under PA 200 of 1957. So that is, and at the time, the department essentially had two different documents, one being PA 200, the other was the Metropolitan Councils Act that was put together for the Grand Valley Metro Council. So a little bit more elaborate, and that's something we can certainly talk about, but MPOs are essentially formed under one of those two. SEMCOG may have its own as well. So, and of course, in that opening recital there, it talks again about the designation of the MACC as the MPO as being a primary thing. But it does go on to speak about some other things as well. And of course, some of these are related again to federal transportation legislation. So we're not only talking about the designation of the MPO, they're talking about the establishment of the MAB, the Metropolitan Area Boundary, now called the Metropolitan Planning Area. So as we do these revisions, we will certainly update the language as well to put the most current parlance in there from the most current transportation legislation as well. So we'll clean up some of that verbiage as well. And then continuing on, pages, I think it's 3 and 4 here, they talk a little bit about the mechanism that is to be put together as well as part of that. So, and the mechanism that brings the counties, that brings the road commissions, MDOT, and MACC into the organization as representatives. And $1 to any of you who happen to catch that MACC was not specifically noted in the agreement. That is because when MACC came in 2007, the board decided just to do a resolution and amend it or append it to this document. So I think another thing we should do as we do kind of the revisions to this is incorporate MACC in all the verbiage as well and remove that addendum that was done back in '07. So they're actually not listed in the document. I didn't give you the addendum. I didn't give you all the exhibits. If any of you want to see those, we can certainly make those available to you. But the main document certainly is here. It was interesting, as I was looking at this again, that there were some other potential future members noted in the document as well. And they mentioned, in the future you may want to have agencies, commissions, other units of government, various committees join the group as well. So there was at least some openness at that time to have entities outside of governmental organizations be part of the group. And indeed, there are a few MPOs that I'm aware of around the state that do have some other agencies, organizations as part of them. There has been some discussion or suggestion in the past about, well, what about the Airport Authority being part of our organization? So certainly this agreement envision and allows for something like that. Moving on then with the designation of the MACC, and again talks about a number of different activities, most of those primarily related to transportation again. Again, the presenting issue here is the formation of the MACC as the MPO, so those types of things, evaluating and planning programming of transportation-related projects and improvements, transportation facility implementation, I'm looking here under designation of MACC, paragraph 2, A, B, C, and so forth. But then it does go on and talk about, well, certainly it goes on and talks about membership as well, but in there, of course, is kind of the overview of the mission of the MACC, to encourage collaboration among neighboring units of governmental units, in that particular case as it's listed here, on issues of area-wide concern. Although it doesn't say area-wide concern, it talks about matters of community impact. So at that point, it kind of lays out the mission that I think we've adhered to quite well for the last 20-some years. But it does show at that point that it was envisioned that the organization would engage in issues certainly beyond transportation, and it enumerates several of them in the agreement that is listed up there as well. Matters related to land use, recreation, parks, public safety, housing, zoning, the environment, social concerns, historic, cultural activities. So certainly there was a vision of having the organization move beyond that, and certainly the Watershed Project falls into one of those, the environment, and a number of other issues that we've been involved in over the years are related in one manner or other to many of those. So that's, I think, a very good thing to keep in mind. It's in the mission statement, and those particular areas are specifically mentioned. Now we're up to members, and it lists the same classifications in the agreement that we have in the bylaws. So these three classifications of participants, who are your cities and townships, your transportation participants, who is the Michigan Department of Transportation and MACC, as well as the road commissions, and then of course the county participants. So those three classifications that you see that we talked about in the bylaws are also present in the agreement. The duration there is kind of interesting. I don't think we think about this a tremendous amount, but if you're looking on page 6 there, number 4, and this is directly related to the establishment of the MPO, and notes that at a minimum, for the MACC to exist, we have to have 4 participants to maintain the designation, and those 4 participants have to represent 75% of the population of the urbanized area. So when you think about where our urbanized area is a little over 99,000, the city of Holland in its entirety, as well as the city of Zeeland in its entirety, are included in the urbanized area. A majority of Holland Township, a little more than 50% of Park Township is, and then smaller portions of the remaining MACC members are included in the urbanized area. So I think that's always an important thing to keep in mind as to, as it relates to our MPO designation, the need to that threshold of participants.
So just to clarify that, of all our members, a total of 4 need to have 75% of the population?
Right. So essentially it comes down to
the bigger ones.
Right. We need 2 of the 3 of Holland Township and Park Township to maintain that population threshold.
Thanks.
Yep. And then the organization there at the bottom of page 6 and on to page 7 talks about the composition. Again, this is 19 because it is not, this document was before MACC was added. So, and the bylaws, of course, reflect that. We're at 20 if with our 5 at-large board members. So that's something we talked about when we did the bylaws revision, and we'll revisit and get clarified as well. It then goes on to talk about funding and fiscal matters at the top of page 7. I think we're all aware, we've been through enough budget cycles to know that participants, there are cities and townships, pay dues that are assessed using a per capita formula. The formula is based on population. For our transportation and county participants, it's by agreement. So it's a fee charged to the federal aid mileage of the road commissions, and the counties pay 11 cents per capita for the population within their jurisdiction of the MACC. So that's how that's been worked out. The agreement does talk a little bit about how the population number, since it is the driving component of the funding formula, how that's to be derived. For a number of years, we've been using the population estimates that are put out by the Census Bureau, and those have worked well for us, so we have found a way to take care of that. This is the part of the agreement that speaks to that cap of $1 per capita that I mentioned when we did the budget or FY17 budget overview. Something that we may want to consider as we're looking at these two documents again, but this is the area where that is put in place. And then it also notes that we have to have our budget taken care of and in place by August 15. Of course, we need it much sooner than that to get it to MDOT for our unified work program and so forth. A couple more items related to funding or fiscal matters. In terms of disbursements, the agreement assumes that we'll be following the budget to do that or by other policies, some of which have been established for us for taking care of the payments that are necessary. Now this is very interesting. The framers there must have been some concern at some point about the potential for the MACC to levy a millage, a tax levy. And therefore there is a specific prohibition against such included in the middle of page 8 here. Now I find this a little curious because when you look at the enabling legislation under which we're organized, it doesn't allow that power. So someone must have wanted to make a point here. And therefore, there is specific language there in paragraph number 9 against the prohibition of levying taxes. Bottom of page 8 and on to page 9 talks about the ability to hire employees and consultants. It also notes the ability for the MACC to enter into a contract with one of its members for services as well. And certainly in our earlier years, we did contract with the City of Holland for our accounting policies. We did that for a number of years when we first started. And we can certainly always look for opportunities to do that as well. And then there are general powers there under paragraph 11 on page 9. Talk about various things we do, charges for services. If we engage in a project with a particular member and we feel there should be some cost share there, we're allowed to do so, certainly to enter into contracts. Now, one power that is enumerated there is to lease, purchase, or acquire real or personal property. Well, we found out when we went to purchase the building that at least from the US DOT's perspective, this entity does not have the power to purchase real property. Personal property, fine. Real property, no. So that's why we ended up setting up the title holding company, MACC Holding Inc., so that we could purchase the building. But the agreement speaks to that. We probably should, I think the US DOT's interpretation is the correct one, so we probably should clean that up a little bit if we're going to stick with PA 200. Take that out of there. And certainly, we have the ability to accept gifts, grants, assistance, things of that nature. Of course, then, the lawyers will always make sure that you're thinking through, what happens if things go badly. And, there is discussion with indemnification, which starts here at the bottom of page 9 and continues on. And it is kind of interesting how this is laid out and what are the responsibilities, but also what is allowed by classification of member. And the agreement does make some differentiation when you get a chance to read that. But first of all, indemnification starts out that if there is a liability that has been adjudicated and it is solely the result of one member, then that member is responsible for the liability. If there's an adjudicated liability and it is jointly or several, is owned by all the members, then it is to be allocated using the per capita formula, and we'll look at that in a little bit more depth in one moment, because it comes back, another part of the agreement comes back to that. It also notes that there is a hold harmless agreement for participants in there as well. So if something does happen, it's envisioned that, and there is joint liability, there's an assumption that you're not going to turn around and then sue your fellow members as part of that. It also speaks to the use of arbitration, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Arbitration is for primarily transportation county participants, and it also notes the need for all of you to carry insurance, which I'm assuming you all do. If in the event that the organization is dissolved, there's a process outlined in page 12 to take care of that. And essentially it says, the assets or liabilities are going to be transferred to the participants, and it notes the participants expressly, in proportion to the per capita population numbers. Liabilities are sent on to both the participants and the county and transportation participants, with the participants determining what is going to be the liability allocation or share for the transportation participants and the county participants. And if the county and transportation participants don't like the allocation of liability, then they can certainly seek arbitration to deal with that. But it is interesting that the way I read this, there is a differentiation there between the participants and the county and transportation participants. Again, it talks about allocation of the cost for joint liability following that formula, the per capita formula, in terms of the percentages and proportions identified there. And again, it talks about holding each other harmless if there are losses, so that you're not coming back and suing each other. Now, so that's if we dissolve the organization completely. If one member withdraws, they are to provide a 6-month written notice to this board if they plan on doing so. If you are a participant, you are not eligible to receive any distribution of the assets unless the organization itself is dissolved within a year. Then you are eligible to receive your share of the assets. Otherwise, you forfeit those. And if there are liquidated liabilities outstanding at that time, you are to pay your share of the liabilities, again, if you're a participant, based on the formula. If you're a county or transportation participant and you choose to withdraw, there's no talk about the allocation of assets to you. However, if there is outstanding liability, then that is to be allocated to you. And again, that is done by the board or by the participants. And again, if the county or transportation member doesn't like what that allocation of liability is, they can take it to arbitration. And then a number of different items related on page 13 here in terms of the budget and investments and so forth. We are, of course, to put together an annual budget, as I mentioned earlier. That has to be done by the 15th of August. We're to follow generally accepted accounting principles in our accounting. We're put together an independent audit, and of course we do that annually. It requires at least the distribution of financial statements on a quarterly basis. We do it on a monthly basis. If you desire to have an audit committee to look over the findings of the audit, that is allowed under the agreement, and certainly it speaks to the prudent investment of any kind of fund balance that we might have in accordance with state law. And then lastly, there are just a couple cleanup items that tend to be incorporated into agreements such as this one. The notice is in there that this is the complete agreement, severability, binding effect, and so forth. So that's my 20-minute overview or so of this agreement. Again, the intent here was to kind of provide you with a baseline of understanding, to either acquaint you or reacquaint you with the document. And again, as we move forward with taking a look at The bylaws, I think we need to do this because the two are certainly intertwined. So this is my proposal for how we proceed at this point. Hopefully all of you who represent a city or township will complete your approval or consideration of that bylaws change. Then what I'm proposing here is to kind of hold a study session. I'm not sure we want to take time out of our regular meetings to kind of delve into issues like I just did today, but not doing that moving forward. So what I'm proposing here is that we hold a study session in September. My experience with this group has been that when we do need to do a study session, we've had the best attendance when we do so immediately prior to our regularly scheduled meeting. So the best attendance we've had is when we gather, say, at 11, and we work on an issue for about 45 minutes or so till about 11:45, or maybe till noon. Then we stop, have a lunch, and then proceed with our regular business meeting. Again, trying to wrap up hopefully around 1 o'clock, recognizing that folks had gathered already at 11 o'clock. So that has been the best way to do study sessions in the past. So that's what I'm proposing in regards to our review of the agreement, further review of the agreement, and looking again at the bylaws to do that. I do have a couple questions posed on the slide there. If we are in agreement to proceed and do that in September, is it your preference to have that be a staff-directed and facilitated conversation, or should we have some professional facilitator step in and help us through that discussion? I have worked with Brenda Vandermeulen in the past on doing some kind of strategic planning and organizational conversations in my role with the MACC Authority Board. She did an excellent job. I don't know what she would cost. Al Vanderberg was also mentioned as a possibility. The price is right with Al, the way I understand it. I have also been involved with him as well, but since the county is a member of the organization, that would certainly be something we should keep in mind as well. Other suggestions and also any thoughts regarding staff-directed or bringing in someone from the outside to kind of walk us through that.
I think you're doing a great job at this point. We're certainly all familiar with it. Any changes can be explained easily.
Yeah.
I would opt for having a staff presentation.
I would too.
I would also. I don't think we're looking at anything major here, from my perspective.
That's fine. Anything else?
At least we can give that the first, if it turns out at the end of the first session, we go, at least we don't know what we're doing. Not likely, but.
Or if
Yeah.
a deeper dive is required, then
That,
someone help out with that. That'll be nice for the budget.
well, yeah, that too.
All right, and then generally, as you look at your calendars, I wanted to give us a little break so we could get it on our calendars if that was necessary. Also, if you happen to look all the way down to the end of the agenda, I'm hoping to have a meeting of the MACC Holding Inc. board following next month's meeting. So I didn't want to start out with a study session and then ask those of you who serve on that board to stick around as well. So I don't think there's a pressing need, and if we start this in September, we'll be in good shape there. Does anyone have any conflicts that they're aware of with gathering at 11 o'clock? And
What date would that be specifically?
August 22, or September 19? No, that sounds, we need the fourth Monday, so we're looking at the 26th, yep. Would that work for a majority of you, for those of you who have your calendars handy?
This is for the study session.
Right, yep, September. We'll be gathering at Olive Township, or at least we're scheduled to gather there. So we would have to check to make sure the venue is available, but since they're hosting the policy meeting, I'm trusting that we could get in a little bit earlier that day and do it.
Didn't you say next meeting was MACC Holding also?
Right, so at the August meeting, following our scheduled meeting, we'll do MAC holding. That's why I don't want to jump into this until September.
Oh, okay. The MAC holding meeting probably doesn't take that long, I would.
No, it shouldn't be too bad, but I don't want people to have to come at 11
Right.
and then
Right.
stay
No,
another
yeah.
half hour afterwards.
September's fine.
Does that make sense as a way to proceed? All right.
I've got a question. Prior to the formation of the MAC, how did the federal funding go for transportation?
So at that point, since we were not an urbanized area above 500,000, MDOT, with their processes,
Okay.
took care of, because obviously there's lots of parts of the state that, there's what's called the 5 to 50 program. David knows a little bit, because you run the small urban program, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's another program administered by MDOT that worked with areas that have populations of 5 to 50,000, and of course the state has the rural program too.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and then as the other couple items on the slide there indicate, my intention would be when we've completed our work, we'll see what kind of a drafting challenge that involves, but either way, I would like to kind of update the document. So all the current members are in there. If whatever changes we decide to make, do go through legal counsel again, yeah, and then we'll have a new set that reflects where we're at today, so.
That's good.
And then, of course, when that happens, we'll send them around again for adoption. All right?
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for the detail there, and I'm sure everybody read through the document last night. I think next on our agenda, you're going to be talking, Steve, about the MOU, maybe, or?
That's right. Included in your agenda packet is a request for your consideration of a memorandum of understanding and agreement that we have with MACC Transit. We actually have one in place and have had one in place for some time, but the triennial review is a process where the Federal Transit Administration comes in and does a review of MACCs. I participate in that process since there are components of that review that involve the MPO, so I sit in on one of those. And one thing we did when we took a look at that was the FTA reviewer did look at the MOU that the MACC has with MACCs. And she pointed out that there are a couple of things that should be updated. One of those is a result of the latest transportation legislation, the FAST Act, and that has to relate to number 7. I tried to highlight the changes on the MOU and the draft that was included in your agenda packet. So the first one there is that it is now required that transit authorities be allowed a seat on the MPO board.
Which they have all.
Right, yeah, as soon as the authority was created, of course, they were incorporated into the organization. So we got that one covered. Number 10 was the next one. The MOU should specifically note that we are going to develop and publish an annual list of obligated projects. We certainly do that on an annual basis already. Now the MOU reflects that. Likewise, that we are going to develop the Transportation Improvement Program in cooperation with MACC. And that MACC is required to submit a financial plan. We've been doing that all along. And then on the second page of the MOU there, number 12 is the last one, in that they wanted to specifically note that in terms of putting together the tip that we take care of required public involvement activities for MACC, and we certainly do that. That comes down to some verbiage we put in our public notices and so forth. We've been doing that for quite a while as well, but we want to make sure that's in the MOU. So those are the changes that are being recommended. Again, those came forward from an FTA review of MACC at that time. Be happy to answer any questions you might have regarding them.
For the MACCs, do they have a stipend they're supposed to pay? Or is that considered paid by all the units of government? Or how does that work?
So MACC does pay dues to MACC. Yeah, they're a dues paying member.
How do you determine that?
You know what? I have never been able to figure out exactly how that was. Yeah, I mean, I think it was just, they just sat down and negotiated that. And then part of putting together the FY17, that number was updated. I think it is going to be $6,000 for FY17.
Tied to population or people served or anything like that?
Nope.
And that was because there was no precedent, or?
Right, yeah, when they came into the organization in 2007, of course, there's only one transit authority, right, so there was no precedent already sat there. And I think the process at that time, I was not involved in that, but some research was done with other transit entities, and that number was arrived at.
How much has the MACC brought in for MACs financially?
Yeah, so, I mean, there's always that component of it that without the TIP and their ability to put their projects in the TIP, they wouldn't be eligible for those. So certainly that's very important. But in terms of actual dollars that this board allocates to MACs, you know, that's primarily CMAQ funding. I think I can think of one instance where some surface transportation funding ended up getting flexed to MACs at the very last minute. It was one of those where there was bid savings, couldn't go into a reallocation of a road project or a non-motorized project, so you can flex. But now flex takes a very, very long time, so we haven't done that in a number of times. So the primary allocation of funding is through the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program. So we get about $425,000 a year, and I would say in the next TIP that's coming up, they receive funding for bus replacements, I think in the 2 to 250 range in 2 of those 4 years. So around $500,000. And I would say that's fairly typical. How that works.
And those dollars wouldn't go to regular roads because they don't help with the environment.
Right, yeah, so CMAQ funding has, some pretty tight strings attached to it.
Thank you.
Okay, so sounds like most of these additions are things that you've been doing already, so nothing new there, but we just need to have a motion to adopt it as presented. Tom? A second? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next up, we have the notice of proposed rulemaking system performance. I think that Elisa is going to share this complicated matter and try to dial it down for us.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to give you an update on a notice of proposed rulemaking, and I'm going to give you the context, but I do want to just alert you that most of the detail that we'll be talking about today is in the memorandum that was sent out in your packets. And my goal is actually to go through this pretty quickly, so let me know if you have questions. I'm going to take some material that could be considered dry and try and walk you through it as quickly as possible and just point out the points that I think are relevant to the MACC as a small MPO. So to begin with, I wanted to explain some background for you, and I want to let you know that these slides were borrowed by the US DOT. They had a peer exchange, and I was able to attend that peer exchange, and this was something that was very helpful just to give some context. So earlier, Steve was referring to the FAST Act and MAP 21, and you've heard me before talk about performance-based planning. This slide is especially helpful just to show you how it all fits together. So we have national goals that are in our legislation measures, which we'll be talking about today, targets, which we are now required to establish with the Michigan Department of Transportation. And we're doing that with them, but they have required by law, they must establish their targets slightly before us. Then we have our plans, our long-range transportation plan, which then is required to incorporate the targets and the measures and the goals. And then we have a new requirement for reporting that needs to be rolled out, if you will. And the reason being is that the US DOT is really asking that all metropolitan planning organizations and state departments of transportation can really demonstrate accountability and transparency. So that's what's motivating the performance-based planning that I'm going to walk through today. All right, and what we have before you is a list of all of the proposed rules. You'll recall that we have responded with comments in the past. And I want to just point out to you that on this slide, this is simply the rulemaking from the Federal Highway Administration. There's another table that lists all of the proposed rules by the FTA. But I want to point out to you, this first one here is safety performance measures. So that's the first set of performance measures. And that was published in March. And then second is pavement and bridge performance measures. And I have a slide that will just walk you through very quickly what those measures are. And that was, that's in process right now. So that actually has not been, the final rule is anticipated in October. And then what you have before you is system-wide performance. So that's what my memorandum is right here. This is opened until August 20th, and that's why this month we're handling this. But I do want to just let you know that at the end of my presentation, I'll give you a preview of some additional proposed rules that came out rather quickly that do impact metropolitan planning organizations and the planning area. So I'll just give you a preview of that, but we'll dive into that in more detail next month. All right, and the benefits of this process. So this is a slide by the US DOT, just reviewing for you what motivated all of these proposed rules. So improved consistency across the country, increased coordination among decision makers, increased understanding of what works, optimizing investments of public funds, and communicating investment returns. And it's interesting, this process has also required that MPOs communicate with the public a little differently. So our Transportation Technical Committee has spent several months now talking about data and how we present that data to the public in a way that's easy for them to understand. So infographics are a perfect example with large text and illustration so that people can understand, we'll boil it down to a very simple level. So it doesn't require that they read a phone book to be able to understand what the rules are. So that's a new requirement for all of us. All right, so very quickly, this is a list of the measures that have been finalized in the safety rule. So they are now requiring a number of fatalities, rate of fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, the number of serious injuries, rate of serious injuries per 100 million VMT, and the number of non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries. So this is something that we are going to be required to report. And our non-motorized plan, as you know, we have a chapter that we focused on safety. So this is something that we've been kind of working towards, but it is now required. All right, and then the next slide shows you our measure for infrastructure. Basically, the measure is the percent of the system that's in good and poor condition. you've heard about PASER. Carolyn and I rate roads every year with the local road agencies and with the Michigan Department of Transportation. So this is something that fits in really well with that process. The final rule, which is anticipated in October, basically establishes targets every 2 to 4 years. But there's one thing that is interesting about this. It has flexibility so that we may establish additional targets if we're interested in doing that. And for this measure, in the final rule for this, we expect a progress report every 2 years. All right, so why I'm showing you this is to contrast it with the memo that you received in your packets. A lot of data. In fact, the proposed rule itself was really thick. And there are a lot of calculations, a lot of data sources that need to be used to do those calculations. And I'll do my best, again, to summarize as simply as possible, but the basic message we would like the opportunity to convey in our comments is that the Michigan Department of Transportation and MPOs, we would request flexibility to be able to establish our measures the best that we can. So, I think that you'll see that through the comments that are presented here. All right, so this first one is the National Highway Performance Program. And you may be familiar with the NHS, the National Highway System. So there's a measure then that's being proposed for travel time reliability. And then you can also see peak hour travel time. So again, I'm going to go just boil it down. Our concern with this measure is that if you place priority on improving simply the driving commute, it conflicts with efforts to improve safety for bikes and pedestrians. So that's a concern we'd like to be able to convey. And then in analyzing the data that's being required for this measure, there's a data set called the NPM RDS, which is basically, it's a large data set, but basically focuses on vehicle travel and freight. So in reviewing this, there have been some real clear gaps in that data. And so if it is required, one of the comments we'd like to make is that the data be improved and that states and MPOs have the opportunity to add supplemental data that we might be already collecting. In our region, we've been working very closely with many trucking companies that have offered to help us identify the number of trucks on local routes. So we'd like to have the freedom to be able to do that. All right, so, and then lastly, there's another comment regarding the peak hour travel time that's in the memo, that we'd like to be able to have the flexibility to use historic travel times or a % of the posted speed data, because using the posted speed data alone is not seen to be adequate. All right, so how's this level? I'm working through it pretty well. There's a lot in there. That's why I'm trying really hard to make sure you get just the key points. All right, so if you have questions, let me know. All right, freight has fewer measures, but the basic recommendation for this freight measure on page 2 of your memo is that we're requesting flexibility again to determine what the speed thresholds are. Currently, there's a 95th percentile that's being recommended, and the recommendation is that we have the ability to use the 80th percentile. And another flaw, as MPOs have reviewed this with the Department of Transportation, we've had a working group that's been going through this. We noted that there's really no distinction between urban and rural segments. Well, in Michigan, we do see a big difference between urban and rural segments. So that's something that fits into the recommendation that we have flexibility here. All right, and now I'm breezing through. We're on page 3 of that memo. Traffic congestion. There are 2 measures there. One is annual hours of excessive delay per capita, And for on-road mobile source emissions, it's total emission reductions that's being proposed. So what we've noted is that these measures, as they're currently presented, don't account for weather, which, as we know in Michigan, does impact our travel. And road construction is also not considered, as well as the presence of driveways, which is, as you know, the number of driveways that you have on a corridor really, with people entering and exiting the roadway, does impact traffic congestion. All right, so almost done. All right, I want to show you how this all fits together. And before I go on, does anyone have any specific questions on the measures that we've been reviewing? I know it's a lot of detail, but important to see how this all fits in, because we'll be required to report on this eventually.
I just have one quick question. How do you measure the vehicle miles traveled per million?
The vehicle miles traveled, well, we work closely
Through those
with...
over-the-road things, or? Sorry, go ahead.
Sure, we work closely with the Michigan Department of Transportation in our modeling process. That's a piece of it.
Okay.
But we also do traffic counts.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah. And that's
I was just wondering, to get to 1 million miles within our MACC area, if that's a number that happens frequently, or?
Well,
probably, or is it close? I don't know.
yeah, for the VMT for the MACC, that's a good question. Annual VMT in the MACC area. Would you happen to know that, Steve?
About 1.4 million.
Okay,
Okay.
cool. So we're just,
All right.
The figure there you mentioned was 100 million. Is that correct? Vehicle, in other words, incidents per 100 million vehicle miles traveled? Where would you get that data from?
We were talking about for the safety final rule,
Right.
that first slide. And that is something too that would fit for a statewide measure. So one of the things that in this process is the state will determine their target and their measures, and then MPOs have the option to use the same measure and target, or we can have our own that, as long as it's consistent and it fits in. So we're not there yet, but this is what's coming.
okay.
And the reason that I'm presenting this to you today is that, if these concerns that I've brought up to you are important to communicate to the USDOT, because they are taking them into account, and they'll change the final rules if they see that a good number of MPOs respond. So we're little, but we have a strong voice, and I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to say, we have concerns with some of these. So the safety rule that I shared earlier, they've already closed the process to take comments. This is simply system performance. So this next slide fits kind of with the schedule. So safety measures, which we just talked about right now, those were finalized in March. State and metropolitan planning, those final rules came out in May. And then, as I mentioned earlier, pavement and bridge, that's expected in October, as well as asset management. And what we're talking about today, we still have the opportunity to provide comment. The USDOT has not yet committed on a time that they'll give the final rule. But they, as I said, they will review our comments. And so we will be asking for a motion today to approve staff to be able to provide comments, which basically are boiled down into that 3-page memo that was provided to you. And I do want to just give you a quick preview of what's coming next month. And it does relate in part to the state and metropolitan planning final rule that just came out. That really clearly defines how the state transportation planning process works and how our MPO transportation planning process works. But there has been a proposal to change planning areas. So that's something that is really important for us to be aware of. And so that's the reason that we'll be coming to you next month with some comments on that as well.
Okay. Does that cover that topic then, or?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't have any
All right,
more
so-
material for you.
I'm sorry, Nancy, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'm sure not everybody goes through it with the type of detail that you guys did, and maybe small, but you have a perspective that needs to be heard. I can't imagine that they left out weather and construction in this process. And of course, the public-private partnership possibility is great and should be allowed, and I would hope that they would consider local crafting, local flexibility, and to get that in there in some little clause would be wonderful.
There's a working group that we at the state have established along with several NPOs to study these issues, and I would commend Elisa's efforts in being a part of that and being a very committed part of that to really understand what's the implications of these rules are for small NPOs.
We don't have toll roads. Michigan's a little different.
Yep.
And we need to figure that out.
We should.
And
Let's add that in the comments.
have our voice be heard.
All right. Well, thank you all.
Okay, good question, Nancy. Any other questions or comments, road commissions, or? No? Okay. Then I think it looks like we need a motion to authorize the staff to submit the comments as shown in the memo. Nancy moved, and support from?
That was good.
Was it Skip? Yeah. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Elisa, you're still up. You have some good news to share.
I do, and this will be really fast. We are very excited. An award letter was sent June 20th from the Michigan Department of Transportation, letting the MACC know that we have received an award for a grant that we applied for. We were really hoping to get it. In fact, last month you all took action in the event that it was approved, that we would be able to amend our UWP. And the amount that was awarded was $47,250 to complete a transit study. So we're very excited about that. The study will basically look at improving transportation connections from people's homes to jobs and community services. And so we're just super pleased to be able to do that. And I want to just let you know again, the details were presented last month, but there are two phases to the study. One is looking at existing transit service, not just transit, but connections to other modes of transportation. And the second phase is looking at future improvements, such as expanding transit service areas to locations where population densities would support future transit. And we had mentioned last month there were two recommendations. One, that we also look at connections to Allegan Transit and to the West Michigan Airport. So those have been incorporated into the scope of work. So we're excited to get started. Yeah.
Lisa, what is the starting and ending time frame for the studies?
That's a very good question. We prepared a scope of work that would basically, we had planned to start this summer and complete by April. But we've actually been talking as staff that what we might do is accelerate a piece of it and then complete the rest of the project later.
Okay.
And so perhaps summer for a final completion date, but we'd like by the early part of 2017 to have some answers regarding Park Township and transit accessibility. Yeah.
Well, good news and good work. Next up, I think we have MDOT. John?
Nothing, I guess, significant to add other than maybe that we've received the new 17 to 20 TIP from the MACC and the new 17 UWP, Unified Work Program, and those have been reviewed by us and transmitted to the FHWA, and hopefully we'll receive approval in a timely fashion. Steve?
I was just going to mention, before I came here today, I was up in Muskegon for they call it a celebration of parts of US 31 being named as a Michigan Scenic Byway. That effort started with a group called Beach Towns, which is a group of Convention and Visitors Bureau along the lakeshore, starting down by South Haven and going all the way to Ludington and including Holland. What that designation does, it brings, what they did is there used to be something known as the West Michigan Pike, and that was how people traveled back in the 30s and 40s and before expressways from the south border of Michigan up north along the lakeshore. So what this group has decided to do is use that historic designation, apply it to the roads that exist today, and do some marketing for tourism along with that. So it's been a pretty big effort for them. It's pretty impressive, and like I said, they had the celebration of that designation today. So I thought I would just pass that on, that parts of US 31 are now known as a scenic byway.
I was watching the news the other day, and they were talking about the completion of US 31 near the Niles exit. Are you aware, what are they talking about? Are they actually talking about finishing that 2-mile stretch where?
No, not specifically. They're talking about a new, upgrading an interchange at, it's actually I-94 BL now, and potentially bringing bringing a facility from the current terminus of US 31 at Napier Road on a diagonal up to that I-94 BL new interchange. So not the straight north.
So what is the reasoning behind them not completing that, whatever it is, a 2-mile stretch? Or?
Well, I guess basically because originally there was an environmental issue that existed in that path. Mm-hmm. And I guess the thought is that environmental issue would still exist. Not only that, but there's development in that corridor path as well now. So that those obstacles would still present themselves and would be the obstacle to completing the straight north path from Napier Road up to the current interchange area. So the thought was to maybe study the diagonal proposal to connect with the I-94 BL interchange, and that would be the ultimate solution to that. So
I just wondered.
Yeah.
I think it's 2 miles or something like that.
Yeah. Well, that happened much to our chagrin as well at the time. So, but the NEPA Act was passed shortly before that, and so we were subject to that as well. So.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the watershed project. Aaron, you can give us an update on the agricultural program?
Yeah, looking at the time, I will truly try to make this brief. Give you a quick agricultural update just on our Great Lakes Commission grant. We are nearing the end of that 3-year grant. We have just a couple outstanding projects that I hope to wrap up very briefly. But as of the last reporting period, we've managed to reduce sediment up to about 2,500 tons and phosphorus at 2,700 pounds over the course of those 3 years with just 10 producers, which I believe is a fairly substantial reduction there as far as that goes in this watershed. The grant covered the Upper MACC, North Branch, as well as Peters Creek. So we're just kind of focusing on our top 3 contributing areas. And the new grant we had, we are rolling through that pretty decently as of just this last few weeks. Our new one was with the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. That's with 13 farmers that was awarded this spring. Again, we were focusing on those same 3 watersheds, but that was not a requirement. Again, we're focusing on residue management, cover crops, and gypsum applications. We also have one producer that is putting in a small-scale WASCOP, water and sediment control basin. There we go. A little tongue-tied. We have gone through our residue management producers, the ones that are cooperating with that this spring, and I should be rolling through with a fuller report for you at the end of this year once we have everything fully implemented and going on for this first year, as well as a wrap-up for the JLC grant. Lastly, we are hosting a tour. This is put on in part by both those grants, as well as Project Clarity. We will be kicking things off at the Outdoor Discovery Center August 3rd, first thing in the morning at 8 a.m. We are visiting 3 farms, looking at best management practices on those 3 farms, focusing on cover crop seeding technology, and water containment controls on farm. And we'll be visiting those 3 farms, wrapping back up at the Outdoor Discovery Center for lunch there. This is a free tour. Everybody should have gotten a postcard at their offices. I have also dropped off stacks to most of you. If you have not all gotten some, there is more in the back. I would encourage all of you to attend if you are able. We do have open seats, and anyone that wishes to do so from the general public is free to do so, though this is focused on farmers, so this should be a pretty interesting tour. We've put some good things together.
Any questions for Aaron? Okay. Well, thanks for your work, Aaron. And looks like we have Carolyn to update us on the road and stream crossing inventory.
Correct. We have spoken about this at a past meeting, but if you would like some more information on it, again, there is a memo included in the packet. Also on the memo are these 4 dates. If you are interested in volunteering with us and maybe coming out just one time to help with the inventory, these are our first scheduled 4 dates. Saturday, July 30th, Friday, well, I'll start, yeah. So Saturday, July 30th, we will be in Zeeland Township. So if maybe you have a specific area that you live in or you represent that area and want to join, that's going to be our Zeeland Township date. Friday, August 5th, we're going to be in Park and Holland Township. Saturday, August 6th, we're going to be in the Overijssel area. And then on Thursday, August 11th, we'll be in Fillmore Township. Also, a thank you to the townships for allowing us to park, to kind of meet up there and park at the township halls, especially on a Saturday. Most likely no one would be there anyways, but thank you for allowing us to use your parking facilities. For the date for August 5th, that's going to be a Friday. We will be just parking at the MACC office since it's a rather central location anyways to those locations. Some past events that we participated in recently since the last meeting. June 22nd, Kelly was at the Kids' Day we were both at this one. I was thinking it was the other one at first. It was the Kids' Day at the Farmers Market. We've done this in the past. Every Wednesday they have one group come out and focus on some sort of educational activity for children, and then the library also does reading to them ahead of time. So we came out and had some coloring pages and other things for the kids to look at that day. Did we do macros that day? No, we didn't. It's hard to remember which ones you'd bring what to. So the kids did some coloring pages of macroinvertebrates and other fun things. June 22nd, we did macroinvertebrates with New Life Fellowship. They kind of have a summer program at their church, and those kids, I think we had about 12 kids come out with us. We brought them in the stream for the first time for most of them. It was their first time probably really playing in the stream and looking at water bugs. So they really enjoyed that. June 25th, Kelly was at the Herrick Fest in Collin Park. Had some activities for the children as well. July 9 was the Water Festival, so that's the photo up there with the tents by the windmill. And I think it was a big turnout this year. Was it around 3,000 that they were thinking? Around 3,000 people was the estimate.
Great publicity.
It was amazing. It was a very, very good year. And then we also had great sponsors for that event. Lynn Katecki from Outdoor Discovery Center, I think she was able to get Meyer and a couple of others to sponsor the event. So Meyer did donate water and fresh fruit. June 12 is our road stream crossing training. So that was our first training with kind of our team leaders, as they would be called. So that was June 12. We went out to Adams Street Landing, met up, and then also dispersed to a few different sites to get a few official inventories in. And then July 21st was just last week. We went to the Zealand Pig Out, always fun. Smells really great too. They always have great barbecue going on. So it was really wonderful. Upcoming events on August 2 will be at National Night Out, like we usually are every year. It's a great community event. And I also heard that I think on that night too, there's a movie afterwards. I think they're starting a movie kind of thing too in the park. I think they'll do 3 different movies overall. So August 2nd, you can stick around afterwards and see an outdoor movie. And August 3rd is the Growing Together Watershed Tour, just as Aaron said. And August 18th, we have our Watershed Advisory Committee meeting that you are all always welcome to attend. We are going to be having this at our MACC office. And then on September 24th, we will have our Fall River Cleanup. This is going to be a little bit bigger deal this year because it's our 10th annual cleanup, and we have a grant to support this one as well. Any questions about the Watershed Project? Wonderful. All right, and we will pass it along to Kelly.
Next to talk about watershed funding in phase 2 of the grant application.
Right, and there is a memo included in your packet that summarizes this, so I just want to kind of hit the highlights. So this is kind of phase 2 of the sustainable funding study that we have been conducting through funding that was awarded to us through the Regional Prosperity Initiative and the West Michigan Prosperity Alliance. So we've been working with public sector consultants, and they are on schedule to complete that sustainable funding study as of the end of August. We've been having monthly check-in conference calls with them, and we've been able to review some of the work that they've done so far, and we're pretty excited to get that final study and to see the full package of what they're recommending. So as a management team, Steve and I met with Wendy Ogilvie from the Grand Valley Met Council and Kathy Evans and then also Aaron Kuhn from the West Michigan Shoreline Regional Development Council to talk about what would the next logical steps be after we have this funding study in hand. Then what? Do we just jump right to implementation, or is there an interim step that's needed? And so we had a really good meeting and good discussion about, yeah, we need to do a little bit more interim planning before we can actually just move forward to implementation. So we developed a proposal basically to work with a facilitator to analyze the study and develop a strategy for implementing. So that's what this next phase is. So we're looking at roughly a year's worth of time, starting in October, finishing up before next fall, ideally by August next year, so just under a year, to work with a facilitator to really develop a strategy for how are we going to implement those sustainable funding options. And again, we'll continue to do this in partnership with our regional and metropolitan planning organization partners. I will also mention we did have a meeting at the end of June with the other watersheds within the region, our West Michigan Watershed Collaborative. We presented this idea to them, and they were also very supportive of moving it forward in this way and felt it was a very important step before we can actually implement funding strategies. So we have requested $59,000 to complete this. There is some detail on what that cost or what that would cover. The majority of that would be to cover the staff time for the 3 organizations, and then to hire a facilitator, and then some of that funding allocated for meeting costs and mileage. So basically what we're planning to do is we've got a 13 county region, and to have these facilitated meetings on a sub-regional scale. So the MACC would work with the Macatawa watershed and the Kalamazoo on the southern end. The West Michigan Shoreline Regional Development Commission would work in the Muskegon area watersheds and north, and then the MACC Council would kind of focus on the Grand River. So we're already kind of in those areas anyway, and it just makes sense to try to have smaller meetings rather than have 50 people together in a room to really look at the in-depth details of this study. Plus then moving forward with implementation, it may work better to work on that sub-regional scale rather than apply or implement a funding mechanism at a 13 county scale. So we're not quite sure what that might look like implementation-wise. We're assuming it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. There's 4 or 5 different options that will be in the funding study report, plus there may be others that public sector consultants did not look at that our sub-regional groups may be interested in pursuing further. So we want to keep this fairly open, working at the sub-regional scale, and allow for kind of customized implementation of funding solutions that fit the political will of each county, of each watershed. And so that's why we felt it was really important to have this next phase of the study. This would be a lot of meetings, and we felt it was probably important to have a facilitator at the table to help us work through this. And then we'll work closely as a management team with the facilitator to put all of the recommendations together throughout these sub-regional meetings, and then publish a final strategy for how we're going to move forward with implementing funding solutions, hopefully by next fall, to get the implementation started. Any questions on that? We should find out in early October whether this would be awarded or not, and then we would kick it off toward the end of October with an initial meeting with the entire Watershed Collaborative. Okay. Oh,
This is all so awesome and detailed and responsible. And overall, it really freaks me out that the Asian carp could completely blow up our entire freshwater system in the state of Michigan and all the Midwest. I mean, it's 20% of the nation, of the world's fresh water. And I don't know who you talk to, and I'm sure you talk to everybody associated with water, and all of these learning institutions that have these research labs and amazing scientists and huge creative manpower across our state. You know, the governor just gave $1 million, or has announced $1 million of the budget to be an incentivizing way to find the answer to the Asian carp problem, because once it's in our lake system, we can't get rid of it. So prevention is our only cure. And all we have is the little electric fencing that Chicago has put in. And of course, their feelings toward anyway, we need to address it ourselves, in other words. So if anybody has any connections with anyone in research, in the world of science, in the world of entrepreneurial development, chemicals, I don't know what it is, but if I were governor, I would say, why don't all of our institutions clean the desk and address this problem now? Because it's not going to get any easier. And I mean, U of M, MSU, Grand Valley, everybody. That would be look at how much coordination we have just for this. It just feels like an emergency, a 911 for research in our country. I mean, in our state and this whole Midwest region. So I hear all this and I'm so impressed with it, and I think it's great, but it could all be for naught if we let this infestation happen.
No, I know that's not directly what you often deal with, but just given what you do you have any knowledge of any working groups that are very active in something like that? Or
I mean, there are a lot of people actively looking. I mean, Army Corps has been involved in that because it's a Great Lakes issue. It's not just a Lake Michigan issue. So yeah, there are certainly people invested in, and from a multi-state, regional, and I think even probably binational effort with Canada. Yeah, and I don't know any specific groups. I get a lot of, I'm on listservs and I receive information about meetings and publications, and yeah, so there certainly is, at a higher level, there are people looking at it.
Sometimes the higher levels don't get it as much as the ground level people.
Right.
And that's why I would love, the word needs to get out that anyone.
It's a local issue too.
It's a local issue as much as it is an international issue. And I know the governor said he was working with the Army Corps of Engineers and hoping to have their partnership in this whole effort.
Right.
But it's one little skinny $1 million compared to our whole huge budget. But what we would lose is way more than that. So, yeah.
The final governor's water strategy is not published yet, but invasive species are certainly a priority topic in that water strategy. Only a portion of that has been published, but there is a high priority from the state to work on all kinds of invasive species issues.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Moving on to administrative issues, I think, Steve, you're up.
Yep, included in your agenda packet is the first budget amendment for this fiscal year. If you had a chance to take a look at that, and the cover memo indicates the amendment results in a projected revenues of $941,620, expenses at $920,503. So we have a little bit more of a balance between revenues and expenses than we started out with at the beginning of the fiscal year. Following the cover memo is the amendment itself, and the line numbers are on the far left column as I referenced those. So just quickly, as looking through that, of course, on the revenue side, bottom line, we're adding about $142,000, almost $143,000 in revenue. The largest chunk of that is line number 7, the GLRI grant. There are several grants noted there, line 6, 7, 8, and 9. Staff has been talking about those going along, so we need to incorporate those into the budget. Of course, the largest is that GLRI grant, and certainly there's a little RPI balance as well that needs to be rolled in from carryover from a fiscal year. That's what's happening in line 10 there. So of that 142, 137 is the addition of those grants, as well as a small allocation that was some CMACC funding that the Western Collaborative was not going to use, so that was rolled into our Clean Air Action Program. That's line 3 there. And then we do need to start moving towards using the verbiage consolidated planning grant. That is what we are now saying instead of PL 112 and Section 5303, the Metropolitan Planning Funds and our FTA planning funds respectively in lines 1 and 2, so you see those combined. And then down on line 42, private contributions, very pleased to have received a grant from Herman Miller in the amount of $5,000 to support the Green Commute Week, so that's nice. So those all added up, result in additional revenues of $142,764. The remainder of the page there at the bottom shows that a number of those are going out in various activities. The reallocated Westrand funding going out for the Clean Air Action Program, as I just mentioned, that $5,000 Herman Miller grant going to the Green Commute program there in line 53. The Step It Up grant was used for expenses resulted that came about as part of that training in line 54. So again, that was a pass through, and then the remaining ones there, of course, the largest amount of that is in line 71, 78, little over 78,000 going to incentive payments to farmers under the GLRI grant. There's some additional SAW grant expenses for some additional work that was done by the consultant, another 8,000 there in line 72. And then again, that RPI funding, as Kelly was just talking about, being used for that funding study, line 76. So those expenses, when totaled, represent $108,089, which again gives us a revenue over expense of a line of $20,023. Any questions regarding that budget amendment? If not, a motion to approve the amendment as provided would be appreciated.
So moved. Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
All right, included in the agenda packet is our financial report, monthly financial report, represents the 3-quarter mark of the fiscal year. Revenues are sitting at nearly 75%, 73.9%. Expenses at 59.7%. As I've mentioned in previous months, we have some lines. An example of that would be 51, where we incurred costs as related to that Step It Up expense. We didn't have a budget line item to place that in, so the amendment that you just approved will clean up those items. Be happy to answer any questions regarding the financial report.
Any questions on the executive committee report?
See, Terry could have got a lot done that day.
That was a big crowd.
And then lastly, as I alluded to earlier in the meeting, as the bylaws require of the MACC holding company, that require a 30-day announcement. It is my intention to call together the board of directors of the MACC Holding Inc. board next month, immediately following the August meeting. The board of directors is comprised of what we classify as the participants or the city and township representatives of the MACC. So if you represent one of those, I'd appreciate it if you could plan on sticking around. I think we can get our work done in about 20 minutes to a half an hour. Basically, it's an update on some property issues. So that will happen immediately preceding next month's meeting.
Okay. Any questions for Steve on any of this, or, okay? If not, then we'll move on to Terry. Terry, thank you for hosting us, and give me an update on Lake Town Township.
It's our pleasure to have you here. It's hard to believe summer for us is almost over. We've completed all of our road projects, improvements and resurfacing. They're done, cleaned up, even the orange cones are gone. We've done the last of our Thursday night concerts, free concerts I should mention, over at the Felt Mansion. That was finished up last week Thursday. We're planning on them for next year. Our parks are overflowing. If you wanted to get to our Lake Michigan Park, I drove by there this morning at 11 o'clock. There was not a parking place available and only 2 cars illegally parked. So we're trying to do better. One quick thing, over at the Felt Mansion, the old carriage house, I think you're all probably familiar with the fact that when we acquired all of that property, the state wanted to keep the carriage house. They were going to use it for storage and this sort of stuff. They never did. For years we offered to buy it. For years they turned us down. We made an offer to lease it, and they said, yes, we'll lease it. So we have a 99-year lease, and we have to make certain improvements to it. And we've started making those improvements, but in September, we're making a big push. We have contracted with a group that's called MC4T. It's Michigan Cares for Tourism. It's a private nonprofit. They supply volunteers and all the materials that you need to complete a project. So we've asked them to come in and completely finish off our carriage house, so we have another second venue for weddings. And I think it's September 14th, there'll be 200 volunteers moving in on the site. And it'll be a crash program, and they're going to finish it off for us. Also counts toward the contributions which we have to make on our 99-year lease. I think that'll finish our 99-year lease improvements. But needed and necessary. One final comment. If anybody is planning a wedding for a daughter or a son, and you want to do it at the Felt Mansion, the month of August, Fridays and Saturdays are already booked, and which is why we need another second one, because we're doing great on weddings down there, but interesting phone conversation. Lady called, making arrangements for her daughter's wedding, wanted the Felt Mansion, and Stacy says, yes, that date is available. But I have to tell you, we're opening a second venue. It's not adjacent, it's a little ways away, but there may be a second wedding going on, and she said, I'll take it. She took both venues for one night. Anyway, Lake Town's a great place. Come back often, thanks.
It is, and thank you. Any comments, updates from any of the other members? Okay. If none, then a motion to adjourn the meeting for today. Howard, and supported by Terry. Any opposed? Nope. All right. And we are done, and our next meeting at Zealand Township Hall, August 22nd. All right. Good job.